This very first lesson of the series on small talk is going to be about understanding the culture of casual conversations and small talk. So, I'm going to talk to you about why small talk is important, why small talk or casual conversations can actually be more challenging than more in depth conversations you have with your friends and family. And I'm going to talk about ways that you can kind of approach people when making small talk in order to create those stronger connections. So, those of you who have been watching my YouTube channel for a while or fans of EnglishWithKim.com know that I talk about connecting in conversation. So, my goal for you is to help give you the skills to help you connect in conversation. And what I mean by connect in conversation, I mean that you're going to build stronger relationships with other people. Even just for a short moment, if you meet someone casually when traveling, you still want to be able to have a good conversation with that person. So often when we talk about small talk and business, or we talk about, having a casual conversation with someone on the street, the language can be what I refer to as transactional. And transactional language is when you have a specific goal and a specific reason for interacting with that person. But small talk might have a goal at the end, but the goal of small talk is really to build that connection with someone. And let's talk a little bit about why. English speaking cultures, small talk is the initial step or the first step of a connection. It's that first stage. So you basically have to go through small talk in order to get to those deeper relationships, in order to get to those more intense conversations or more specific conversations. And that's why so many people, when you're learning English, you struggle because you learn how to ask for what you need, or you learn how to answer particular questions. Like, for example, I work with a lot of clients on job interviews or asking questions at conferences or presentations. But the problem is a lot of times people skip to that second stage, but you need to start with the first stage, which is small talk. And if you skip small talk or you're not very good at small talk, you're going to find that makes it hard for you to build stronger relationships in the office or with your colleagues or your classmates in university or college, or even just meeting new friends, because people expect this little first stage of small talk, and it can be a long amount of time or just a few minutes. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So the reason that small talk is so important is that the goal of these small, short interactions with people is to help the other person feel comfortable in your presence. So that means they're going to feel comfortable for you. And you also, when you make small talk or you initiate small talk or you participate in small talk, you show the person that you're open to talking more. So it's basically like standing in a doorway and opening the door and stepping through. Before you step through, you have to kind of explain why you're there at the door, and then somebody can invite you into their house, right? So small talk makes everybody kind of understand how it is that they're going to feel about each other. So small talk can also increase the possibility of a personal or professional relationship in the future. And because if you make small talk with somebody and then you see them again, they're already going to be familiar with you. If you don't make small talk with someone, or you don't have a casual conversation, they won't remember you because you didn't have any sort of small connection. And I'll talk about other situations where small talk is important. But it's just really important to understand that this is that first stage. So being good at small talk really can help you have those better conversations. The good news is it is something you can practice. It's something that native English speakers practice, and it's something you can practice as well. So I want to encourage you to really listen to this series of lessons and then think about how you can start integrating this practice into your life. The other thing about small talk is that small talk can create, in casual conversations, can create trust with the other person, because when we start to get to know somebody, we don't immediately trust them, right? But if you are having a conversation with someone, they get a read on your personality. They understand kind of what kind of person you are and whether or not they want to trust you, and whether or not they want to continue talking to you or work with you, or move forward in a professional relationship, right? And be somebody that they really want to participate. with. So for example, the small talk can be essential if you need somebody to buy something from you, right? You don't just go up to somebody and show them, some earrings and be like, buy this. Although that has happened to me in other cultures. Of course, I'm not going to buy. I don't know who this person is. But when you make small talk and, oh, like if I like the person, I'm more likely to buy from them, even if they don't have something I want, right? I'm going to feel like I like this person. I want to do something for them. That's just me. I might be a little bit easy to sell to in some situations, but trust is so important for convincing someone to buy from you, convincing someone to hire you if you want a job, convincing someone that they want to work with you on a future project. Think about if you have colleagues or coworkers that you don't talk to that often, the only chance you have to interact with them is in a networking meeting or an office lunch, an office party, and you don't really know them, but you might have a need to collaborate or work with them in the future. By creating small talk with that person or making small talk with that person and creating a conversational connection with them, they're going to know who you are and they're going to be more willing to work with you in the future. If they don't know anything about you because you've never talked in the office ever, they just know that you work there, they're going to be a little more suspicious, a little more reserved about their initial attempt to work with you. So that can also be something to keep in mind. Another thing I wrote down here is that small talk can also be important for somebody sitting next to you on a tour bus or when you're traveling in a bus or on an airplane, right? Small talk is essential for, sometimes you sit down on a plane or bus or a train or any sort of public transportation and there's no conversation with the person next to you. But if you make a few overtures, like you make a few attempts at small talk with the person, you might have a great conversation. We just never know where that relationship can go, right? That can be a business colleague, someone can have a job for you, that might be your next best friend, it might be your future partner. You never know what will happen with small talk. So I really want to encourage you as we talk about small talk going forward to really think about how fun it can be to have these better conversations with people. That's personally why I've become better at small talk, is I really like talking to strangers. I like getting to know people's stories. I'm very curious about other humans. That's one of the reasons I teach English and I teach conversational English, is that I love talking to people and learning more about their stories. So I hope that makes sense as to why, small talk helps you determine how you feel about that person, because we have an expression in English that first impressions are everything, and there are opportunities to make other impressions if the first one doesn't go well for whatever reason. But if you do have a positive first impression, that can be great to having a better relationship with the person down the line. And remember, relationships talk about any sort of connection with another person. An acquaintance is an acquaintance type relationship, right? Okay, so if we are trying to make small talk and we notice that the other person's not responding to us or not engaged with us or not interested, it can be uncomfortable, especially if that person is an acquaintance or work colleague. And that's really important because Americans and other English-speaking countries and cultures, we expect people to engage with us a little bit before starting a business meeting or before, somebody's selling us something. That's why you notice if you go into a store in the United States, they always say, "Hi, how are you?" You don't really necessarily have a longer conversation. That's not very good small talk, but you will notice that you often make small talk when you're purchasing things, right? The cashier will talk to you a little bit. It helps ease that transaction, instead of it just being like, here's what I want, please, please pay, let me pay for it. Usually people say, oh, how are you doing? How's the day? Nice weather, right? They make a little bit of small talk in order to have a more comfortable relationship with that person. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind, that small talk is the doorway to a deeper conversation or even just a more positive interaction with people. And the reason today's lesson is specifically about the culture of casual conversations and small talk is that in some cultures, small talk can be considered a waste of time, right? And it can be considered something that isn't really that necessary for people to learn and talk about, right? Because it's just, it's these conversations don't have a lot of deeper meaning. But in English-speaking cultures and American business culture, it's very important to learn how to make small talk because people think if you ask for something without some sort of friendly interaction or exchange, it can be a little off-putting. Like the person can feel like, why? They feel like that they're just a thing and you're just commanding them to do something. in other cultures, right? American culture, business culture, and other English speaking cultures are kind of in the middle, right, of small talk being important. In some cultures, small talk happens for hours and hours before you make a business deal, and Americans are seen as too direct. And then in other cultures, you just say what you want, depending on the person. But I just want you to understand that small talk is expected among all levels of society. Yes, Americans can be efficient and get straight to the point in business dealings, but in general, you're going to have better relationships and better connections with people if you attempt to make some amount of small talk before asking them for something, whether that's professional, personal, some sort of shopping interaction with somebody. So that's important to keep in mind. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some situations where you may find yourself making small talk. So you may make small talk while waiting for the bus at a bus stop, waiting on a subway platform, shopping or purchasing something. I find I make small talk a lot in those situations, making appointments, talking to someone, when you walk into an office, when they have to do something on the computer, you end up talking to them. You may make small talk in an elevator. That's, where the elevator pitch comes from, which is common in business. If you have an interaction with someone who has power or financial means to help you. You may make small talk at a networking event, which is very common in American business culture, to network, to interact with people, either, a broader association where you'll meet people in the same field as you, or even a networking event in your own company or nonprofit organization. You'll have an opportunity to make small talk. You can also potentially make small talk at a party, right? When you're meeting new people, a party, a gathering, a group dinner, a family dinner even. You might make small talk with relatives, like extended family who you haven't seen in a long time. In between classes at school or university, right? When you have time between different class periods, you might make small talk with people in the hallway or outside in the I forget what the word is right now, but when people are hanging out in the lawn, or they're hanging out, it depends on the university, whether there's a big open green space there. You might make small talk when you're catching up with a friend or acquaintance that you run into on the street, when you're unexpectedly seeing someone, because this is why small talk is an overall kind of general conversation with the person. It's not an intense conversation unless you know the person very well and they're a close friend. But the thing you have to understand about small talk is that we make small talk when we either don't want to go more in depth, can't go more in depth, don't know the person very well, don't want to talk about personal subjects, and when we just don't have time to have this more in-depth conversation. So it's a way of showing the person that you are being friendly to them, but you know that the relationship or the time is not right for talking about something more in-depth, more personal, more intense. So those are the situations where we tend to make small talk. So as I mentioned, why small talk is important, I want to just list off a bunch of reasons again. So when you meet a new person, you're not really sure what role they're going to take in your life, right? They might connect you to someone important, give you an idea that changes your life. They might be your next best friend, your romantic partner, or your manager. You just never know what that relationship will be. This is why I also want to encourage you, if you visit a place a lot, you visit an office, a building, whatever it is, a lot, you want to make small talk with the people who work there, the doorman, the administrative assistant or secretary, anyone you interact with, because they can potentially help you later on. If they know that you're friendly to them, that can help you a lot. To be perfectly honest, in American business culture, a lot of times, if you're especially in a big company or a large company, they actually ask the secretary or administrative assistant, how did that person talk to you? Because it shows a lot about your character. So if you're very friendly to that person and very kind, then that can help you get a job, right? If you're just kind of treat that person like they're below you, that can help you not get the job. So it's important to think that small talk is important with people of all different backgrounds, right? Because in some cultures, we treat people differently based on their job role or their relationship to us, how much power they have over us. But in the US, we're expected to make small talk with almost everybody. And people will remember whether or not you make small talk. There's a lot of stories of former presidents who are very friendly to the people and remember everyone's names. And they're considered the ideal for people who make small talk because they make everyone feel like they're important. So something to keep in mind, small talk is really big. And the other thing that's important to keep in mind about small talk is it can help you and other people feel at ease, feel relaxed, feel more comfortable. So if you're good at small talk and the other person isn't, you can make them feel more relaxed and they will actually be grateful for you or to you. They'll be grateful that you helped make that conversation go a little bit better. There's something to keep in mind since this is a video for people who are learning English, for non-native English speakers. The thing you want to keep in mind is that, as non-native speakers of a language, and I'm speaking from my experience speaking Spanish, when you're a non-native speaker, a lot of times the responsibility is on you to make the other person feel comfortable with your language ability. If you meet a kind person who just wants to encourage you to talk, that's great. But a lot of times people, if especially if they're not speakers of other languages, they're not sure you understand. So it's your goal with small talk is to encourage that other person to connect with you, to show them that you're able to have a good conversation, you're willing to participate, you're interested in what they have to say. So small talk can actually really open up a stronger relationship for you if you're traveling in the US, living in the US, or living in an English speaking country. So I just really want to encourage you to make an effort to make small talk with people, because that initiative, that ability to start the conversation helps them feel more comfortable with you. It's something to keep in mind. Um, Also, small talk can be really fun, right? Making small talk is fun because people are unique. People have interesting stories. That's my personal reason I like making small talk. You never know what you're going to learn from the person. You never know who you're going to talk to, right? You might talk to a celebrity on the street because you're talking to them about their dog, right? You don't know who these people are sometimes. And so you can learn really interesting things from people by making small talk. And like I mentioned earlier, the reason small talk is so important in business is that we like to like the people we work with. So when you make small talk and you create that kind of positive connection with the person, they're going to feel more positive about working with you, and they're going to be more interested in having another connection with you down the line. Um, the other thing that is important to keep in mind about small talk is that it enables you to check in with someone and maintain that connection with them. So sometimes, like I said earlier, you don't always have time for a longer, more in-depth conversation. But if you run into a friend or acquaintance on the street, even just talking briefly for a few moments helps say, hey, I still care about you. Oh, yeah, I still care about you. And you go on your day. That's why you think about if you're studying at a language institute or university or something like that, in the breaks in between classes, you see people talking to each other. They're not going to get into this in-depth conversation of this huge thing that happened in their lives, but they're going to kind of talk about how their day is going, how the class is going, because that helps maintain that better connection with someone. And like I said, not every conversation opportunity is the right time to talk about things that are more in depth, detailed, more intense, more emotional. So that's why, if you have a chance to talk to someone for a long time, that doesn't mean you always want to go really deep in the conversation and go into those in-depth conversations. So small talk can help you keep things light. And so that's why being able to make small talk on several topics, which is what I'll be talking about in the future videos, will really help you understand like how to keep the conversation going. And that's why my focus is always on asking really great questions, asking better questions, more interesting questions, more engaging questions, because you can keep that conversation going for an hour making small talk. So many people stop at the just niceties, the beginning of the conversation, but I want you to make small talk that really helps you keep the conversation going without having to go into these in-depth, deep, hard conversation topics that we often try to avoid in situations that aren't appropriate, like work or school or on the street, right? Or with strangers at the bus stop. And the last thing I want to mention is that people skills are your ability to interact with somebody and to seem like someone that they will like working with, someone that talks to other people and interacts with other people. People skills and communication ability are often key to succeeding in the American workplace. So that's why small talk is so important. Of course, not every native English speaker or non-native English speaker is excellent at making casual conversations and small talk. But if you can do it, that's going to give you an advantage, because you're going to be seen as this person who's really engaging, really interested in the other colleagues, and people remember that. Like I said, people remember the people that they like, and they're more likely to like you if they create this conversation with you from the beginning. All right, so The last thing I'm going to talk about now is why casual conversations are sometimes more difficult than more in-depth conversations with friends, family, partners, whoever, people, coworkers that you really like and admire. So casual conversations can be more difficult because, we all have the things that we focus on in our lives, the things that are most important to us. And so if the topic is really important, it's hard to avoid it when you're talking casually with someone. If something's going on in your life, it's hard to not talk about it, or something you're really excited about. It's hard to not talk about it with people. So casual conversations are require you to think about, do I really want to talk about this with this person? Do I really want to have this kind of conversation? And that's up to you to decide. You can decide whether or not this is the conversation you want to have with the person. But it can be more difficult because when you're with friends and family, you can talk about everything, right? You feel comfortable telling them something you're worried about, something you're excited about. So casual conversations require reading the situation and understanding what's right. Also, if you're making small talk with someone you don't know very well, you have to find some sort of common ground or shared interests. So common ground means shared interests, things in common. So when you already know and like the person because they're your friend or family or partner or whoever, coworker, you don't have to find something in common with that person. But if they're an acquaintance, someone you just know very casually, you have to find something to talk about. So you have to find something that's interesting to the both of you. And so we'll talk about the most common topics for small talk and better topics for small talk in future videos. But you'll notice that a lot of times people, stick to the same topics, but if it's of a topic the other person's not interested in, the conversation just ends. So it can be really challenging, to make small talk or have casual conversations because you're seeking that interest, that shared interest with the person. The other thing that happens with small talk is there can be that pressure of time, right? There can be that restriction, right? The fact that either you're seeing the person on the street or you're about to get on the bus. So you're trying to create this conversation with somebody, but you know that the time period is very limited and you know that you might not be able to keep talking with them for longer. Or if you're talking to someone at work, they have to go back to work. So it can feel kind of uncomfortable when you know that there's a limit to that amount of conversation, or it can be kind of a relief when you're talking to someone on the bus or somebody sitting next to you on the subway and you have to get off and you're like, phew, I don't have to talk to that person anymore. That's great. Okay. And the other thing about small talk that can be so challenging is that often small talk happens in groups. When I'm thinking about this and as I'm planning this lesson for you, I'm thinking about all of the work lunches that I used to have where you're talking with several people at once. And it can be really challenging to pay equal attention to every single person. Even if there's just 3 or 4 people in the group, it's hard to make small talk with everybody equally well at the same time. So that's why you'll notice at parties and gatherings, people tend to separate off into pairs or triads because it's hard to have a conversation with several people at once, but you may find yourself doing that. So it's hard because you want to make your other people feel included, and you want to make sure everyone's listening to each other, everyone is really interacting with each other. So you'll notice that at least one person will take the role of kind of controlling the conversation and making sure people are interacting. The other thing that can be challenging about small talk is that it requires active listening. So, active listening is showing the person that you're listening to the conversation, and that requires work, attention, requires the ability to really hear what the person's saying and respond effectively. And so, that is amount of work. If you're trying to have good small talk with the person and really create that connection, it requires an extra emphasis on the work and on the listening skills that you need. So if you're struggling to understand native English speakers, you're going to have to kind of train your ear to expect those common responses in order to make better small talk. And the last thing about why it's challenging is that if you're the person talking more, it can be kind of exhausting to do all of the work talking. So that's why I want you to be prepared to ask and answer questions. And we're going to talk about that in the future lessons because sometimes people who aren't good at small talk expect you to just keep talking, and they're comfortable with that role. I have a really good friend who loves asking questions, but she doesn't realize sometimes that it can be hard to never hear her answer the questions because I'm like, I don't want to talk anymore, right? So sometimes you get tired of answering the other person's questions. And that's why also I want you to keep that in mind. If someone's asking you questions, you can also take a break by asking them questions. So that's why we'll talk about good questions in the future lessons. Okay, so like I said, when we make small talk, we usually focus on neutral conversation topics. So in this series, I'm going to talk about the most common neutral topics as well as more interesting topics that will help you make better small talk. And the thing that I also want to mention about the culture of small talk is, obviously when someone says, hi, how are you? Good, how are you? That's not an invitation to a longer conversation unless someone brings up like, wow, did you see that crazy storm that passed through today? Or did you see that traffic? Or did you hear about this? Right. I remember, one time hearing about Michael Jackson passing away, and I mentioned that when I was in a store because that was a big news item. So even though I was just buying a smoothie somewhere, I still mentioned it to that person. So you'll notice that sometimes people will lead you into more conversation, but for the most part, those type of short interactions, hi, how are you? Good, how are you? Can stop there. But the thing is, if you're making small talk and it's going on a little bit more, we tend to expect to go through several turns. So I ask a question, you answer, you ask a question, I answer, I ask a question, you answer. So at least 3, maybe 4, maybe a few more turns. And if you just stop after one and the person wants to talk to you, it can feel very abrupt. So remember in other videos where I talk about the culture of conversations, we think about a balloon, hitting a balloon up in the air. And so if you just pop the balloon after one turn, the person feels like, oh, that person's not so great at small talk. If you hold the balloon and you kind of end the conversation because you want to talk about your topic without asking questions, that can end the conversation. So the goal is to keep hitting the balloon in the air for maybe 3 or 4 turns. So that's really important to understanding the culture of these conversations in English. Um, and yeah, Americans expect to have people go back and forth 3 or 4 times. So in the future lessons, I'll talk about questions you can ask, especially if you choose one topic and it doesn't go very well. That's something that a lot of people do, including native English speakers. If they try to talk about something and they find that the other person isn't that interested, they get a little discouraged. And so I'm going to encourage you to ask better questions or find a way to ask a different question. And that's why a lot of the skills I have on my channel are about changing the subject, avoiding uncomfortable questions, because I want you to be able to pivot the conversation away from something you're not interested in talking about, or if you notice you're interested in it and the other person isn't, change to something that they're more likely to talk about. So we'll be talking all about how to do that inside Small Talk. So that was a lengthy overview of the culture of of casual conversations in English, and also just the importance of small talk and why it can be challenging, but why you should definitely practice it. So we'll be talking about making small talk and just having better small talk conversations. So how to ask better questions for small talk and how to keep the conversation going. So there's a lot of resources I'm going to share with you in the next few weeks, and I really hope that these lessons are helpful for you. If you already know you have questions about small talk, please leave a comment below the video and ask your question so I can be sure to answer it in this future series. Because there's so much to small talk. It says it's so funny that it's called small talk, but it's actually very big and very important and really key to being seen as a fluent, comfortable, confident English speaker is mastering small talk. And that's actually a great way to end. I was talking with one of my clients this week about when I felt like I was fluent in Spanish, and it was when I felt like I was able to create a conversation with other people comfortably, with people I didn't know well, because your friends are much more forgiving of your mistakes and your awkwardness or the fact that you don't always understand. So I felt like I was fluent when I was able to create a great conversation, not control it, but create it, make people laugh, make people have a great conversation with me and ask me questions and ask them questions and kind of create that great dynamic. So that's what I want to encourage you towards, since I know so many of you want to be fluent in English or want to sound fluent in English. Being able to make small talk is going to really be key to helping you do that. So if you have any questions going forward, leave a comment below the video. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. That lets me know you're excited about this series and that you're interested in learning more about small talk. If you want to share this video with your friends or family who can benefit from learning more about small talk in English, please do so. I appreciate it. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can just click subscribe, click the little English with Kim symbol on the video, and I'd be happy to keep sharing these videos with you because I always try to schedule them in advance so you can watch them there. The other thing I want to mention is that I'm going to put links below the video with my guide to making more interesting small talk. We'll be talking about this on video, but just something to get started. And I will also include the links to the playlist that will be created with all these small talk videos. So you can find that link below the video as well. Once again, I'm Kim from EnglishWithKim.com. I'm your guide to the essential conversation skills you need to sound more natural in English. Thank you so much for watching this live lesson on YouTube. I look forward to sharing more with you again soon. See you soon. Goodbye.